Welcome to the Guthrie Family Podcast. I'm Danny, and this is Haley. This is a parenting and relationship podcast. Thanks for joining us today, and this is part 2 of being consistent.
That's right. We have so much information about this. We had done a lot of research into it and kind of pulled out some books that we've used in the past that have helped us so much with our parenting routines and our family routines that we felt like we really wanted to share all of that with you, and hopefully it will help you with your routines as well. We left off on things that interfere with consistency,
Which is busyness.
and well, there was several different things.
Right.
Actually, busyness was the last thing we talked about, but just talking about how we can pinpoint those and either cut them out of our lives or figure out ways that they don't interfere with our consistency and our routines.
And it goes back to kind of a little bit of what we talked to in another podcast about making a to-do list and a don't-do list. In the last podcast from Consistency, we talked about having routines and making a plan for your family so everybody knows what the plan is, and that you can you can have that routine and be consistent in that plan. And a great part of planning is making having goals. What is your goal for your family? Making a list of things to do to accomplish those goals, and then having a list also for things that you do that's not moving you towards that goal that you can cut out. So once again, the to-do list and the not to-do list is a great way to do that when you're planning your routines.
Okay, so the next question is, why is consistency important to children? So this one's really important because, some people say, my kids just fly along with me. We fly by the seat of our pants and they're fine and everything's fine. But the reality is I can look around and I can look at kids and I can say they don't have consistent bedtime routines, or they don't have consistent discipline in their lives, because you can see the insecurity in children. It creates insecurity in children when you're not consistent.
Right.
Children want for you to be consistent, even though they may buck it. They may try to figure out, ways around it. The reality of it is they're secure in it. They know what is expected of them, and that's really important.
Right. They're definitely going to challenge whatever the rules are. Even though they know the rules, they're going to challenge those rules. So don't give in when the rules are being challenged, just to be consistent in staying firm on what the rules are, or what what you're doing, the routines. It don't always have to be rules. I say rules a lot, but a lot of times when I say that, I mean like routines in what you're doing.
Right. So if you have rules in your house and you're constantly fluctuating and giving your kids different answers, so say that, your rule is, one of my rules is we don't eat anywhere but the kitchen. You sit at the bar and you eat, or you sit at the table and you eat, but
Right.
You will not eat all over my house.
Right.
And that is basically to create an easier life for all of us so that we don't have crumbs and nastiness everywhere. I don't want them eating on the couch. I don't want to have to vacuum. We go in through all this. And so since Jaden is in charge of vacuuming the couches and under the cushions, he really agrees with me on these rules.
Right.
But because this is what we do, most of the kids don't really, they never even think of eating anywhere else. So when we have people over and their kids are eating all over our house, of course, I'm a nervous wreck when that happens, but it lets me know that maybe they don't have that as set up as a priority. But also, here's what that does. That creates an easier time for me. I don't have to walk around cleaning all the time and sweeping and trying to get things up. So it creates consistency for them. The only one that bucks it is Kirsten.
Right.
Because she's the baby.
Yeah,
and
she's two. So she's still trying to learn the rules, and she's still pushing the boundaries of us being consistent. But
yeah, so most of the time when we have rules, we do tell our kids, this is the reason that we do this. It is to make all of our lives easier, because our rules are not just to be there to be rules. They are rules, and they're there for a reason. They're there to help us all have a better and more productive life.
And Haley brought up a great point too, that we don't make rules, arbitrary rules, just to have arbitrary rules. We have rules that they have a purpose and they have a point. And one of the things that we do is that we tell our children why we have rules. We don't just say don't do this. We say we're taking that as an example. We say, well, we're only going to eat in the kitchen because we don't want to have ants all over the house. We don't want to be getting the furniture nasty. We don't want to, we give a reason. Not that you have to give your kids a reason. I'm not saying you have to explain things to your kids, to make them mind. But what I'm saying is that,
well, if they understand it, they're more likely to obey it.
Right. Instead of it just being an arbitrary rule and they not really understand, why can't we only eat in the kitchen? That way you give them the reasons and they understand. It's just a deeper understanding. They understand why, okay, mom and dad wants us to eat in the kitchen so the rest of the house don't get nasty. And then we're not really going to go into this today, but when you begin to give your children chores, even Kirsten, our 2-year-old, she helps out. She has some chores that she helps out with. But when you begin to give them chores, they begin to understand the reasons.
Right. Well, and this goes back to, and I believe this is in the book Shepherding a Child's Heart. That's another great parenting book I'll put on the blog. But there's an umbrella of protection. And so this starts with God. God has given us rules, and they are not because he hates us or he wants us just to obey him just so he can be God. They are for our protection. So they create an umbrella of protection. So as long as we obey God and his rules, it keeps most bad things from happening. Not all, of course, there's things that are going to happen, but it keeps things from happening. There's natural consequences for our actions. Right. And so for our kids, it's the same way. This is what I always tell them. This is my umbrella of protection. As long as you're obeying me, I can protect you. When you don't obey me, then I can't protect you. So if I'm with you and you run into the street and you disobey me by letting go of my hand and running into the street and you get run over, I can't protect you. I mean, that's a very literal but natural consequence to what happens. So it teaches your children not only to obey you and how important it is to obey you, but also we're trying to, of course, teach our children how to obey God. We're literally shepherding their hearts so that we are teaching them that obedience is very important, and that has to be consistent, because if your child doesn't obey you all the time, when you are in a situation like that where you're in a parking lot or whatever, and they disobey you because they consistently or inconsistently obey you, then there's going to be a problem, and you can't protect your children. And so there are some children that I won't keep away from their family because, and I've just told Danny, I said, I can't keep them because they are so disobedient. I don't know that I can protect them. And as crazy as that sounds, if I see that your children don't obey you, they're probably not going to obey me. And if they don't, then I don't necessarily want them here where they can hurt themselves or others because they're not willing to listen and obey. Right.
And a neat thing about that analogy that Haley brought up is that, in the Garden of Eden, God wasn't keeping anything wasn't keeping anything good away from Adam and Eve. He was only keeping what was bad away from them. And it got, they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the only thing that they began to understand was evil. They already knew all the good that they could possibly know. And like that, there's not, and then this is interesting. And then the punishment was they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So the good thing got withheld from them because of their disobedience. So like in raising children, there's nothing that's good that we're trying to keep away from our children. We want to give our children all these great and good things, but when they disobey, some of the good things get taken away. And the only thing that we're really trying to protect them from when we make rules is the bad things. And so that's a great analogy on how you can kind of line your life up with the way that God's laid out things, and it makes things so much better.
Okay, one of the things and this really opened my eyes as far as parenting goes, in one of his books, Gary Ezzo, one of the Wise books, Child Wise or whatever, said, what is your goal for parenting? Right. What is your goal as a parent? And he said, is your goal to make your child happy? Are you making your child happy by having that as your goal and your priority? In other words, by you giving them whatever they want, every time they ask for something, if they start to pitch a fit, just give them what they want. Try to create peace and happiness. What are you creating? Are you creating happiness? And he said, if your goal is to create confident children, by always telling them they're good at stuff, even if it's not even true, are you really creating true confidence in that child? And the reality is you're not. Right. You're just avoiding what's going to happen in the future. You're going to have future conflict and problems because you have given them false confidence. Mm-hmm. And you have told them that they are a priority in life and that whatever they want they can have whatever they want, basically.
Right.
And so what you should do, what his whole point was, he said, if you're fostering godliness and character with your children, that's your children will then be happy in the end.
Right.
And they will be content and have confidence in the end. He said, you're looking at an end goal. You can't focus on today. I just want peace. I don't want you to cry. Here, take this. Just be quiet. He said, if you do that, you are going to destroy that child. But if you're looking at your future goal and you're saying, this is our goal as a parent, then you will create the happiness and confidence that you are wanting to create in your child.
Through the consistency
Through
of doing.
consistency. Right.
So what's next?
Okay, so what does consistency look like? So we've kind of went over a lot of that. But one of the things that our biggest thing is nip it.
Yeah. Nip it quickly. I've had people tell me that I was too harsh with my children. But one of our beliefs is, and one of the things that works for us is my kids, the people that said that they don't understand our rules, but our kids know our rules. They know what's expected of them. They know why that's expected of them. And they know when they're breaking the rules. So there is no me or Haley counting to 1, 2. There is none of that, because the kids already know what they're supposed to do. It's been explained to them clearly. So if they're disobeying or doing something that they know that they shouldn't be doing, there is no counting. Sometimes I may give them one warning, like, "Hey, you're getting out of line. Straighten up." But after that, it's time for discipline. It's time to get them straightened out. And we nip it immediately and quickly, and it doesn't really matter where we are.
Well, we keep it from escalating. Here's what people do is they allow behaviors to continue. They see their child moving forward. And, I can tell when my children are just getting a little bit out of sorts. Their attitude changes. You can tell they're heading towards something that they want to do, and that they know that they're not supposed to. So
their posture, the way they move, everything.
Right. I mean, you have to really know your children and pay attention to your children. So we'll see that, and I'll say, "Hey, you watch that. Straighten up. Because this is not going to end well for you." That's what I always say. This is not going to end well for you. And so they normally will look up and say, they'll say, okay,
because we're consistent and disciplined, and they know what's coming. They know that there's not going to be any counting. They know that the next step, they're going to get their butt popped, more than likely.
Right.
So that consistency allows them to know in their mind, this is what's about to happen, and I know the consequences, so I better make a good decision.
So with this, we have decided to keep it from escalating, to nip it when it happens, so that we don't see this behavior continue until it actually creates a whole lot more problems. So that has worked really well for us. So that's one thing. And the other thing, or number 2, is don't allow behavior to continue until you're so frustrated with your children that you yell at them. Because what we've actually discovered and read is that can actually cause resentment and rebellion in your children. So what we see parents do, and we have done before as well, and it is a lazy parenting technique, but it is just letting things go because you're busy and you're tired and whatever, and then the behavior escalates, and then you just get furious, and you're just like, all of a sudden you're just screaming at your kids.
Shut up, go to your room.
Yes. So, and we see people that parent this way, and it's like they don't ever do anything about it until it becomes a huge problem. And that is not a good idea. So, obviously it changes your relationship with your child when you yell at them. It's not something that you want to do all the time. So what we want is to nip it in the beginning and keep it from escalating, and because we don't want to be that person that creates that resentment and rebellion, because at that point you're just correcting behaviors.
Right.
You're not focused on their character.
Or their heart.
Their heart, exactly.
And one of the things I want to bring up with that, because all this that we're talking about now seems extremely harsh, and when you see it played out, it looks extremely harsh because
it doesn't really. I don't think it does.
Maybe not extremely harsh, but it does look kind of harsh because it's like stop, and then it's taking action immediately. And some people they'll look on it from the outside and say, well, the kid didn't have a chance to even think about it. Well, they already know what's going to happen because we're consistent in what we're doing. But I want to say this: we try really hard to affirm our children, not affirm false beliefs. Not like American Idol. We don't go around telling them, "Oh, you sing great. You should be a singer." So and they're terrible. So we don't affirm lies, but we do try really hard to affirm things that are true.
Right. And we recognize things that happen that are really good and things that the kids have done that are great decisions. Like, you made such a great decision when you did that.
And we affirm, God loves you. We affirm that you're valuable and you're smart, and you need to make better decisions because you're smart, and we expect that out of you. So I think it's very important, and we'll talk about affirmations in another podcast, but I think it's extremely important to affirm your child with the things that they're good at. And I know there's a lot of parents out there that want better for their kids. I see my kids doing some things sometimes, and I think to myself, well, if they would do it this way, it would be much easier or a lot better. But they still did a good job. So sometimes it's better just to kind of swallow that and just go to them and say, man, you did a great job. You're really good at that.
Right.
And affirm what they're doing.
And that's the next point is consistency is also shepherding their heart.
Right.
So one of the things that we do or that is important is talking about the Bible, reading the Bible, praying with your children, and having quiet times with them, which we've already kind of gone over that in the last episode.
Right.
But this is very important that you do consistently because you do want to create children who are confident, but instill confidence in children. And you don't, life is not all about don't do that, don't stop, quit. Our job as parents is to guide them in what to do. So we give them things. We say, okay, this is what we expect of you, and this is what we want for you. And so if you do this, this will happen. You can't let your child just raise themselves. You can't say, hey, just go find something to do. Now, there are times when they say, hey, go outside and play, go do this. We don't stand over our kids and make them do things. I mean, it's not all, we don't have a bunch of soldiers running around. Right. But during that free time, of course, they're allowed to make their own decisions and do their own thing. And we're going to go into also an example of how being consistent and what it looks like through the different ages. So I found a great example through one of our books. So we're going to kind of go through that. And it kind of shows you as a parent what your role is in consistency through the different ages.
And as you stay consistent in your goals and in your plans and in just discipline and raising your children, one of the things you really that comes along with that, I guess an effect of that would be that you build confidence and your children builds confidence. And through the affirmations and being consistent, it helps to build their confidence.
Right. I mean, our children definitely know that they're loved. So even though people may see us and think, gosh, they're strict, they really, and then I've heard several people say, well, you have so many kids, I guess you can't have one step out of line. And I think, well, I mean, yeah, that's true. But even if we just had the two girls, we were always kind of strict with them as well, and consistent with them as well.
On some things, like we're really strict on some things, but some other things, like we're really not.
Well, it depends on their age and their level of responsibility, which is what we're about to go into.
Right, and but we've even when Zoe was 2, there were certain things that we allowed her to make decisions about. I think it's very important to allow your kids to make decisions. And I've seen a lot of parents begin to get onto their children before their child actually did anything wrong. And sometimes you need to just allow the child to go through the motions to see if they're going to make the right decisions.
So that is something, we talked about nipping it.
Right.
And you're saying wait until they do things.
No, I'm just saying give them the opportunity. You should nip it once something happens.
Right.
But what I'm saying is sometimes you need to allow them to make a decision and see where that goes.
Right. Our girls are funny about that. So they love to correct the kids, and sometimes it drives us nuts. But they'll see them about to do something and they'll go correct them, and we'll say, wait, maybe they were going to make a different decision. Yeah. Maybe they were going to correct themselves. So let it play out. And sometimes too, we see that they're about to do something that has a natural consequence that is going to take care of itself.
Right.
It's not going to hurt them bad.
Natural consequences is a wonderful educator.
Yeah. I mean, he's about to hit this ball against the wall and it's going to come back and hit him in the face. Well, I guess he won't do that again. That type of stuff. So, there are times when we do step back and say, hey, just let's see what happens, because then once they do that and it doesn't work out well, then they're like, oh, well, shoot, I shouldn't have done that,
Yeah, and as a parent, you can tell them, hey, don't do that. That's not going to work out well for you. for you, or you're going to get hurt. And they're really never going to believe it until they actually do it and they get hurt. But you try to protect them as much as possible. But sometimes the natural consequence of their actions, the best teacher.
Right, exactly.
So let's move on.
Okay, so I have 3 examples, and these go through the ages of responsibility. This is, again, going back to the Child Wise book, and I know I've harped on that book a lot today, but I have gotten so many good principles of parenting through that. So starting with the ages 2 through 6, he talks about boot camp parenting style. So what he's talking about here is giving your child boundaries that evolve into freedoms as responsibility is demonstrated. So when your kid's between 2 and 6, so that's exactly what we were just talking about.
Right.
He's saying, give your kids boundaries. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. You're standing there and you're correcting things as they happen, so that you're basically walking them through it. This is boot camp. This is what we're going to do. It's, this is our rules. Are you doing them? So this is ages 2 through 6. Which this gets more interesting. That's kind of like everybody's like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. But anyway, ages 7 through 12, he calls training camp, and this is going through drills and exercises and stopping to instruct when needed. So he's using these sports analogies, but for me, I think that's a great analogy. So you're talking about you're running drills with your kids. So as your kids 7 through 12, you're literally giving them scenarios and saying, okay, how do we handle this? Or you're walking through them with scenarios and you're saying, okay, if this happens, this is what we do. And
we've just recently done this with both our 13-year-old and our 15-year-old. We were discussing some stuff with our 15-year-old, and I said, look, if you do this, this more likely is going to be the consequences to your actions, but you're going to have to make that decision.
Well, actually, what you're talking about, I'm not going to correct you, but I'm going to correct you. It was more the next phase that what we did. We were more coaching. With the training, we're actually standing there and watching them go through it. We're a little more hands-on with the training camp. So I'm going to disagree with you. You will agree to disagree. But anyways, so with training camp, you're a little more hands-on. Number 3 is ages 13 through 19, and this is coaching. This is your children are out in the game for themselves. You are giving them plays to run. You can call timeouts here and there, but you can't stop the game. You are transitioning children to adulthood.
So we just recently went through this with our 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Where we had a conversation with her and said, hey, if you make these decisions, this is more than likely what's going to happen. And, but you're going to have to make those decisions. And, it's on you. You're going to reap the consequences of those decisions. And here's the way that's going to play out. So, and like I said, we just did this with our 15-year-old. So it does get to a point to where, like Haley's talking about, you move away from them being disciplined about everything, and you've already coached them. They already know right from wrong, and it's a point in their life where they need to start making their own decisions and understanding the consequences of those decisions.
Well, and at this point, you should have moved forward enough to where you should not be going backwards. So if you go through each of these stages and you are consistent, when they're 13, you shouldn't be telling them, hey, go brush your teeth. Hey, go wash your hands. Hey, did you put deodorant on? Hey, and I'm not saying that won't happen. I'm just saying that if you're consistent, this is the point where you're moving them from a childhood to adulthood. It's a huge transition time. As you're giving them more responsibilities, as they are showing that they are responsible, then they should be more and more, they should show how responsible that they are. So you should see a little bit more consistency there with them.
Just be consistent with your kids. Be present with your kids when you're there. We've talked about that before. I think it's a huge advantage to sit down as a family and have a family plan, so your kids know what to expect. As far as what the rules are, what your plan as a family is, things that you expect of them and that you don't, have chores for them. Another big thing is going to be affirm your kids when they're doing something that's good, instead of just always being no, stop, don't. You need to really affirm your kids and be consistent, be extremely consistent in all this. And as your kids get older, like Haley was just talking about, allow them to make decisions and know the consequences of those decisions, because that one of the best teachers in life is the consequences of your decisions. So anyway, guys, I really appreciate you guys being with us. This is the end of part 2. If you would, in the down below, give us a comment on, I guess, if you're making a plan for your family or not.
Sounds good.
Okay.